Well, it's exactly 30 minutes past the hour. Of course, tomorrow is World Environment Day. Now, Kenya, like the rest of the countries in Africa, will be celebrating World Environment Day tomorrow. That is June the 5th. Representatives from around Kenya are coming together in Kwale to commemorate the International Day with a tree planting ceremony. Now, several activities have been organized across the counties, and here in Nairobi, the celebrations will be held at Kikuyu Springs, during which this year's edition of the African Climate Change and Environmental Reporting Awards will be launched. This year's theme is Beat Plastic Pollution. Joining me to help put context to Africa's environment agenda are Dr. Isaac Kalua, the Kenya Water Towers Board Chairman and founder, Green Africa Foundation. We also have Michael O'Brien Onyeka, who is the Senior Vice President, Africa Field Division of Conservation International. We also have Benson Ochieng, who is the Executive Director of the Institute for Law and Environmental Governance, is joining us all the way from the coastal city of Mombasa. Good evening, gentlemen, and welcome to the program. So let me begin with Dr. Isaac here. And Dr. Barely a few months after Kenya won global acclaim because of the plastic ban right here in Kenya, apparently enforcement challenges are rolling back, the gains Kenya has realized. From your own perspective, how would you rate the plastic ban in Kenya?
It's a great thing because we are leading by example. The trouble with plastics is mind-boggling. You look at the effect in the waters, our seas, the blue economy is being affected in a tremendous way. We are losing fish and affecting the ecosystem in our seas in a way that we shouldn't. So there is tremendous progress. As to whether this is the best thing, what we are doing, and that we are moving in the right direction is something that we need to check. Mm-hmm. What is the weight, the grammage of the plastics that we are supposed to ban? Are we having laws in place about the issue of recycling? Are our systems right for return back and the pollution being affected and the person polluting paying for the same? These are issues that we need to engage ourselves as a country. But there's no regrets, and we should not regret. What we should do around these kind of laws and ban of plastics is to create businesses and to engage Kenyans in the process of making money as we clean up the environment. It's a good thing. That is why you can see what Rwanda is doing today, and you can realize that many countries across the world are looking forward to emulate what we are doing. As a matter of fact, they are wondering, how did Kenya pull this one?
Yes, well said, Dr. And before I engage you, Michael, let me engage Benson Ochieng, who is in Mombasa once again. Now, Benson, Dr. Isaac says that Kenya is in the right direction as far as banning plastic ban is concerned, but there are reports that, these plastic bags are being smuggled from other East African countries, namely Uganda. Now that it's very much evident that these plastic bags are coming from Uganda, do you think there is need to have some sort of a serious regional, concerted effort from the East African region to, bring an end to the use of plastic bags altogether?
Well, definitely, Yusuf. This was not going to be easy. Of course, you saw the kind of opposition that accompanied the ban of the use of plastic bags. You hit on a very serious problem. We have very porous borders in the Eastern Africa region, and enforcement of such an important endeavor was definitely going to be a challenge for us. Of course, in the case of Kenya, we are hearing that our neighboring countries, and Uganda in particular, has become attractive, both for those who want to use plastics and for the investors who are threatening to go across the border. But as Dr. Kalua says, I think this is an idea whose time had come, and I think Kenya is doing a good job leading the way. If anything, Kenya hosts the UN-only environment body, UNEA, in Nairobi. So I think we are on the right track, and we just need to put more effort in some of the areas that have been mentioned. But definitely the issue of enforcement is critical, and the need for regional cooperation is an important issue. There was a good step in the East Africa Legislative Assembly not long ago when they discussed a bill to ban plastic in the region. But I think there was some backtracking and the bill was shelved. But one hopes that this agenda can be picked up at the regional level and that enforcement can be done in a cooperative way so that we move forward as a region. Otherwise, if only Kenya and Rwanda do this, I think it will be a very big challenge for the rest of the East African region. I mean, for them to achieve the set objective.
Sure. Now, Michael, as a person who has a passion in environment, I'd like you to take us, to take our viewers through this year's World Environment Day theme. And perhaps can you tell us how dangerous, once again, can you perhaps tell us how dangerous these plastics are to the environment?
Thank you, Yusuf, and very happy to be here. Plastic pollution is a very, like you well put it, very dangerous dimension and the brazen display of our lifestyle as a species that we continue to live not in consonance with what is required in nature, but against it. Plastic pollution does not only manifest in the huge tons of plastic we find by the seaside or landfills, but that these materials remain active, non-degradable for a very, very long time. And therefore, it begins to choke the earth where we dump them into, or begins to choke the sea. In 2010, the United Nations, or 2017, last year, launched the war against plastics. And because they say that the current trend and rate of plastic pollution of the sea alone, by 2050, there will be more plastics than fish in the oceans. And that's worrying because we know the blue economy, fishery, coastal fishing is very important to millions of livelihoods and communities across Africa. And therefore, it's something we should take seriously. And the important thing is that it's doable. It's manageable. We can halt the trend. But I wanted to touch just quickly a bit on what you were discussing earlier. Addressing plastic ban does not start and end in a promulgation of a law that bans plastic. There needs to be clear, viable, feasible framework in country, in region, to address this issue. We need to establish, say for example in Kenya, it was a very big, bold step. Huge commendations to the Kenyan government stepping into where many African countries dare not step into. But we need to have clear recycling plans as an industry, an alternative industry. We need to have, at a minimum, at the household level, 2 to 3 recycling bins for biodegradable plastic glass. And in each county, you should be talking about a recycling plant in each county. This will create jobs. It's not just to pass the law to ban plastics. Secondly, it has exposed, the challenges in Kenya has exposed the need or the lack of in the current situation, but the need to have both bilateral, say, between Kenya and Uganda, and a regional approach to this. Because you may create an island of sanity in Rwanda or Kenya, but if the neighboring countries are not playing ball, then you have a big challenge.
Well said, Michael. Let me engage Dr. Isaac now, and I'd like to talk about something else that is very important. That is about illegal logging and the destruction of the country's water tower. This is in respect to Kenya. And understand, Dr. Isaac, you're part of the forestry task force. I know you've made your recommendations and your findings. Do you think Kenya can reach the 10% forest mark?
Easily. We can reach that. There's a plan that is in place. The report clearly stated and did recommendations that I believe will be followed. The problem has been in individuals, not institutions. The challenge has also been on matters of having systems in place. And I believe it is a common thing that it cuts across all our major industries and institutions and also private institutions, and no wonder some of the drastic measures the presidency has taken and is taking towards changing this nation. Recovering the forest cover and bringing it to 10% and even more. The plan is in place. this is doable. So to answer your question, yes, it is doable.
Sure. And Benson, I'm sure you've heard Dr. Isaac's comment there. He's very optimistic that we're going to reach the 10% forest cover in Kenya. But apparently research indicates that more than 100,000 hectares of forest are under private hands. There's still issues to do with, land tussles in various, forests in this country. Are you optimistic, as, Dr. Kalua is, with regards to the 10% mark?
Well, I am optimistic about our ability to get to 10% forest cover. In any event, we don't have a choice on that. The Constitution decrees that we should get to 10% forest cover. I have serious misgivings about the processes that we are undertaking in the name of dealing with a serious issue of forestry and, of course, the issue of sustainable management of our forests. It's a good thing that some goodwill is being shown from the highest officers in the land about this matter. As a lawyer, I have serious misgivings about the procedures and about the widespread condemnation that we run to in the name of dealing with problems. We seem to act in a very knee-jerk way in dealing with serious, intractable challenges in this country. And that is where I have the problem. I think we have to be very clear and deliberate in how we put in place systems, how we strengthen our institutions, how we sustain them, and how we fund them. I am still very skeptical, despite everything that people have said about the report that was issued recently on forests. And if we cannot demonstrate that we are going to put our money where our mouth is by deliberately planning for sustainable management of forests and our resources, and shirking this ad hoc way of dealing with problems in the manner that we set up a task force and within no time we were being told this and that, and behold, we were being told and now we are reaching Canaan in this regard. I don't think it's going to happen. What we need to do are clear systems in place, deliberate planning, in the forest sector, as is the case with other sectors in this country, funding those ones and ensuring that we have certainty about how we are going to conduct business. It's not going to be done through ad hoc administrative decisions made by the roadside. Despite that, one must commend the goodwill that is being demonstrated in this regard. But of course, the challenge comes with the issue of deliberate planning and sustainable management of these sectors.
Benson, let me engage Michael now. And Michael, Benson says that, there's need to have strong institutions. And why do you think, from your own perspective, I know you have an experience, with regards to the different countries in Africa. Why do you think it's so difficult for not just Kenya, but other African countries, in stopping illegal logging?
I think my colleague referred to that earlier, is the unresolved issue. Part of it is the unresolved issue of access and tenure of land. Who really owns the land and therefore the forest that stands on those lands? Is this the community, is this the individual, or is it the state? And then going beyond that, you face the challenge of several African countries having mostly only this natural resource, the forest, as the major resource around, and therefore they have to harvest it. And that's why some countries are encouraged to be clear about communities, conservation, and commercialization of the forest, so that you earmark clearly what percentage of your forest you want to commercialize in terms of harvesting, and then develop a mitigative plan to ensure that you are replanting as you are doing that, and that you are not touching primal forests that supplies us so many things. But it's an issue of a challenge of increasing population, pressure on the land, and the urgent need on the part of the state to provide jobs, provide livelihoods, and security for the country. It's something that no single sector, neither the civil society, nor the state, nor the private sector, can handle alone. And these three groups will need to come together and fashion out a process and framework contextualized on that individual country context on how to best manage the forest, recognizing certain global principles of zero net deforestation, no degradation of primal forests, and making sure that you do not marginalize indigenous communities in the process. But it's a challenge, but again, it's a challenge that is surmountable when all parties come together. And there are so many experiences from Conservation International around the world in Africa, where we have helped states and other stakeholders to come to a clear, feasible framework on sustainable forest management that is a multiple win for the environment, for communities, and for the state.
Said Michael there. Now, Dr. Isaac, can you perhaps tell us, because this is something that's not affecting just Kenya, but also other African countries, but from the regional perspective, the East African region, is there like a joint effort by Kenya, Tanzania, Uganda, and by extension Rwanda in stopping illegal logging and the sale of timber?
There is a challenge, and I totally agree with my colleagues, Wakili and Michael here, that we need to stop this thing of ad hoc kind of a process. The only unknown thing to most Kenyans is that there has been processes that have been going on. It's only that they've been handled by different individuals, and then the operation of a specific follow-up is dependent on the individual who is sitting there as the head of the organization. But there is tangible progress over a long period of time. We have challenges at the position of policies on some of these issues. And as Mike says, where does the land sit? Where does the forest sit? And I am so glad, I'm the happiest person to see that next week, I think sometime next week, we are soon going to have a policy on physical planning. This is where you deal about issues of the land management, the specific apportionment of what land will be used for what purpose, and then it also goes ahead and challenges that we must now start dealing with at a policy level, the conflict of different laws and rules that are being followed so that we can really manage our land use plan and so many other issues. These are the real issues. Unless we deal on these issues at the right time, then we will continuously have a problem, not only in Kenya, it is also happening in Uganda. And that integration of issues, I know that it has started with customs, it is soon going to get into other issues. You can see very recently also, I think on issues of inspection of motor vehicles and also the pollution issues, you can see Uganda has slipped off and they are doing it in a different way. Some are allowing older vehicles, others are doing this. Issues on plastic as well, that is why we are having some porous edges where we have plastics coming from Uganda and other countries, until leaders at the top sit to discuss and agree, until professionals choose to advise in a manner that makes sense to the people of these nations, we shall never stop dealing with such issues of great importance in an ad hoc manner. And I want to encourage, you see, something like plastics, sorry to bring you back to plastics, Mohammed and team, Ibrahim and team, sorry, that we say that we are going out and we make even our presidents to go and clean up exercises. I have particularly called upon the people who are doing these kind of things. Create businesses around the cleanup exercises. Allocate what is reusable and create laws about reusing, recycling. We don't have laws in this country. The issues of recycling is more expensive to use recycled products than new products. Yet we can apportion the tax regime so that it accommodates and makes this thing easy. When we talk about recycling, even of the things that cannot be recycled to where they were, you are able to bring out businesses so that people can be paid for collecting plastics and taking them to an industry that is funded or supported by the government in one way or another, and people can produce poles. You can say, as a matter of policy, the government land or any land in a specific county shall not be fenced with using wooden poles. You shall use plastic poles. And then you create businesses. In creating this, the country will be clean. People will dig up even plastics that were buried many years ago. Mike has just said that this will always be there. The way we think, the way we advise, polluter pays policy is very clear. Why, ask yourself, why would we have a situation where the EIA payment has been cancelled so that an organization like NEMA will have to pay for some of these expenses and depend on national government? And on the other side, we are saying that NEMA needs support to be able to implement all these laws. And it is us, the business people, it is us, the leaders, who are commending something like this, which is not clever at all, unfortunately.
Clearly, a lot needs to be done. And Benson, you've heard there Dr. Isaac Alo's point of view. Do you think there's need for, this, especially in the region, East African countries, to talk to each other? Because there's no point of banning illegal, taking care of illegal logging in Kenya when, perhaps in Uganda, people are cutting trees left, right, and center. Do you think there's need to have a regional, concerted effort in East Africa?
Well, definitely is one of the weakest links in our efforts to sustainably manage our resources. You are talking about forests. In a project we implemented not so long ago with support from the UN, UNDP, and the World Bank, we found that there is a lot of cross-border seepage, if you allow me to call it, of natural resources across our borders. At any given time, if you ban the use of, if you ban logging in Kenya, what happens is that businessmen or some unscrupulous individuals find a way to continue doing that particular activity and bring in the timber as if it was coming from across the border. And this is very common with our porous borders and with our shared forests across borders. So what we are talking about, regionalization, harmonization of efforts, and particularly policies and laws, is something that is indispensable if we are going to deal with this issue squarely. Not just plastics, but also generally our natural resources. And this takes a greater collaboration among institutions, REMA of Rwanda, NEMA of Kenya and Uganda, NEMEC of Tanzania. These institutions have a very good platform within the EAC framework, and the treaty creating the Eastern African Community is very clear that cooperation and cross-border engagement is one of the principles on which it is based. Unfortunately, some of the countries within the East African Community have been dragging their feet when it comes to harmonizing legislation. Sure. And even currently, there is a protocol that has been awaiting ratification for I don't know how long now. And some of the countries are just reluctant to come on board. We are talking of plastics, as I did indicate, not just last year. This was one of the hottest issues on the agenda of the East African Legislative Assembly. But as you may be aware, some countries actually developed cold feet about this. And this is where the support of everybody is required. I think some of the countries were convinced by the East Africa Business Council that this was not the right way to go. And we know that a lot of education is required in this region for business to understand that managing the environment and pursuing economic growth are two sides of the same coin. And actually, it's not a zero-sum game, as Daktari did indicate so impressively. It is possible to pursue sustainable development.
I think you've delivered your point there. We're almost out of time. I'm sure everybody has listened to your point of view there. Of course, environment is a matter of life and death. Now, let me give both Michael and Dr. Isaac a minute each. We are out of time. Let's talk finally about the COP24. I understand this is the next World Conference on Climate that is going to take place in Poland. Michael, what does Africa need to do to make sure that they get the most out of this conference? Thank you.
Simply and short, Africa needs to remain united, go to Poland COP24 with a single voice on a common message, which is premised on the principle of joint but differentiated responsibility. Joint responsibility when it comes to climate change, that we are in this challenge together. but differentiated responsibility in the sense that Africa has played minimal role in global greenhouse gas emission, and therefore the developed countries that have built their economies on climate-damaging models, economic models, must pay penance, so to say. You know, we talk about $300 billion dollars a year required to move Africa from to carbon neutral economy.
Well, Michael, we're out of time. Sorry, I think we have to get another time for you, but I'm sure you've delivered a point. The Africa needs to be united. Dr. Isaac, you have a minute, very briefly. What does Africa need to do to make the most, to get the most out of COP24?
Can't be said any better than what Michael said. And one other thing is that as we face the international communities, as we get out there, one voice is very important. But let's also imagine and believe that this developed world went through what we are just about to get to. If it is coal, we are looking forward to mine and to get it out of Kitui and in other places in coast. And we need to value that and just equate what this will be, because that is pollution that is imminent. And then look out and face the world and say, this is what we are about to do as you work on zero emissions. What monies do you have to compensate the people in this area so that they can get into other livelihood activities? These are the things that we need to face and deal with as a country. One voice is what is going to take us to the next level, because the polluters have to pay for what they have done. And we are suffering today out of what they did. And it's no longer about supporting our continent, about supporting our country in what they would call international aid, because we are also tied in our hands because they are supporting us through other agencies and other funding that looks like development.
Thanks a lot,
it should
Dr.
be separate
Thanks,
on what
Dr.
is
Isaac, for your generous comment there. Dr. Isaac Kalua is the Kenya Water Towers Board Chairman and founder, Green Africa Foundation. Michael O'Brien Onyeka is the Senior Vice President, Africa Field Division of Conservation International, as well as Benson Ochieng, who has been engaging me all the way from Mombasa, is the Executive Director of the Institute for Law and Environmental Governance. Many thanks, gentlemen, for your input. And earlier, we did ask you this on a Twitter poll: how has your life changed since the abolition of plastic carrier bags? At Patrick Zioka says, next online should be abandoned plastic bottles. At Patrick Zioka again says, the environment is now cleaner. Let the ban stay and be ruthlessly enforced. One final one from Gabriel Onyango says, the environment around me has now improved in terms of cleanliness. Though shopping has become expensive, one may be forced to spend up to even 50 shillings on shopping bag. Many thanks for your feedback then.